Welcome back, America, to Sound Retirement Radio, where we bring you concepts, ideas, and strategies designed to help you achieve clarity, confidence, and freedom as you prepare for and transition through retirement. And now, here is your host, Jason Parker.
America, welcome back to another round of Sound Retirement Radio. I'm so glad to have you tuning in to this episode. You're listening to number 397. The title is Create a Meaningful Family Legacy Beyond Money. And before we get into today's show, I want to start the day right by renewing our mind. I've got a verse here. This verse comes to us from 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 18 and 19. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. And then, of course, something to put a smile on your face, share with the grandkids. What did the fish say when he hit a concrete wall? Damn. I recently had the opportunity to speak with Heidi Thorsen. She's a passionate teacher of guided autobiography classes, which she conducts via Zoom. Heidi leads classes to help people capture their life stories and then turn them into meaningful memoirs that can be shared for generations to come. If you want to learn more about the work that she's doing, visit tyememoirs.com. I hope you enjoy this interview, and I hope it inspires you. Without any further ado, here's my conversation with Heidi Thorsen. It is my good fortune to bring Heidi Thorsen onto the program to talk about sharing your story and writing a memoir and just creating this rich family legacy. I heard this quote one time, I think it was from Abraham Lincoln. It went something like, the only way that the dead, or writing your story is the opportunity for the dead to communicate with the unborn, or something along those lines. Anyways, I just think it's a really neat way to create a rich legacy for those that come after us. Heidi, thank you so much for being a guest on Sound Retirement Radio.
My pleasure.
This is going to be a fun conversation. You are a teacher by heart, by training. And at this phase of life, you get to walk life with people and help them, teach them how to share their story. So I'm curious to know, how did you get started? Why memoirs and why writing like this?
Oh, that's a great question. First of all, you tapped right into it. I love partnering with people and teaching them. It has been my career to be a teacher for many years, but as my teaching career took a different turn, I found the opportunity to teach people about writing their life stories. And I found a organization, or kind of a program, that was started in Southern California by Dr. James Beeren, called Guided Autobiography. I thought, this looks really interesting. And I took the class on becoming an instructor in this method of capturing your life stories. And it took one class and I was hooked. And I knew this is something that is worth pursuing. It's valuable. It's insightful. And what's more is it will be a contribution to society in helping people to write their memoirs.
And when we were talking just before I hit the record button, you talked about how writing your memoir doesn't necessarily have to be a public thing. This is something that you can do just for your family. It's not necessarily, if people want to take it and try to publish, they're welcome to do that. But just the power of sharing a story. Why is it, or what is it about a person sharing their story, that sharing their life, that is so powerful?
Well, first of all, taking the time to reflect on your past is incredibly remarkable. You have a way of looking back at your past experiences, your successes, your decisions you've made, perhaps even some of the choices that were good that turned out well, choices that were bad, relationships that you've had with people. And when you write about them and kind of sort through the fabric of how they unfolded, you have new insight into what actually happened and how they happened. And you get a perspective on your life that you haven't had before. But you also then have the opportunity, through writing your stories, to share them with people in your life, your friends, your family. And they gain a greater insight and appreciation as to who you are, where you've been, what you have learned, your values, and so on. But in this process that I work through, we have the opportunity to meet with small groups, perhaps groups of 5, 6 people, and other individuals who are on the same life journey as you are, who are writing their memoirs, and in a very safe and confidential, secure setting. Once you have written on a particular theme, we share those stories in a small group, and you then hear the experiences from other people that are in your group, and they give feedback that is supportive and affirming of what you have written, and you do the same with them, and it just builds your confidence.
What's that experience like, to be in a room or I guess online these days? You're doing a lot of your teaching online with 5 or 6 or 7 people, and they're opening up and they're sharing both good and bad aspects of their life in the written word. What's that like for people?
Without being cliche and being totally sincere, it is life-changing. It is absolutely amazing. I have seen people blossom, open up, just come to grips with things that they haven't sorted through in their life. I've seen people find joy in reflecting on things that they did that they had forgotten about, and they go, "Oh yes, I made it through this particular roadblock or hurdle." They see the perspective of another person, someone who might have never been in contact with them in their life, and they hear their life story and they go, "Wow, I never knew that before." For example, people of 2 different faiths coming together to share their experience. It's life-changing. People form friendships after classes are over. They continue to meet. They want to keep getting together for years. It's just remarkable, because you have this feeling of accomplishment, satisfaction, understanding.
So what's the methodology? What would people expect in a class? What's the experience like? Take us through that process.
It's a great question. And as I mentioned earlier, this process was founded by Dr. James Beeren, who is a very famous gerontologist. And in fact, he's the founder of the School of Gerontology at the University of Southern California. And he was actually a neuroscience researcher, but he stumbled upon this method of people writing about their life story 2 pages at a time. And he found that when he introduced this in one of his classes that was a little bit flat, people weren't really responding in his class. And he just said, "You know what? We're going to toss the curriculum out the window that I'm teaching right now. And I want you all to go home tonight and write a 2-page story on a branching point in your life." People went, "Oh, okay. This isn't like the neuroscience class that I thought I was taking, but okay." And people came back, and this was a multi-age group of people, both young and old. And they came back the next day and they shared their stories, and they started talking. And they were talking to each other. And suddenly the class over the next course of time became very enlivened. So he set out, and he with his, with much research and looking into the science of, what experiences have people had in their life, he landed on 10 themes that are universal to everyone's life. For example, branching points in your life, your
wait before you tell me the other ones. I've never heard this term before, branching points, but it's a great visual, because you can kind of see a crossroads. It's like I go down this path or I go down this path. And I had the opportunity to go fishing with my father-in-law one time, and before he had passed away, and we went back to Montana, where he's from, and he took me back to all of his fishing spots. But we drove from Washington to Montana, and during that drive, it was just he and I, and it was so fun to hear those crossroads, and him reflect on, I wonder what life would have looked like if I had gone down this path versus this path, and it was fun for me. But so that's what the idea is with a branching point. Is that right? It's kind of like this moment in life where it takes a direction and you reflect on that. Is that true?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're exactly correct. And branching points, sometimes they turn out good, sometimes they turn out bad. Some branching points we have had a choice in making, and others we didn't have any choice. That move that you made when you were 5, you had no choice in that. But perhaps the college you went to, you had a choice in that, or other branching points. So there's a lot of ways to look at the different branching points in your life. So you take this and you choose one of them, because you only want to write, at this point in time, 2 pages on that branching point. And we do activities in class to stimulate your thinking. Students then go home for the week and write a 2-page story on that theme that was presented in class, for example, branching points. They come back the next week and a new theme is introduced in the first hour of class. But in the second hour of class, everyone shares that 2-page branching point story. And that is where the magic happens. That is the highlight of the class, is when people share that story. Just exactly like you talked about with your father-in-law.
Yeah.
You just gain insight. He gains the appreciation and the deeper knowledge of that branching point and analyzing it. You, as one of his generation, with his grandchildren, have a new perspective on your father-in-law.
Yeah.
It's a win-win.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on, that I think this conversation is so important, is sometimes it feels like the fabric of society is being torn, and it seems like this is a way to bring people together. And I love it that it's so intentional, and it's. But I want to hear about some of these other prompts. So one was branching points. I interrupted you. What were some of the other prompts or the things you guys write about in these classes?
Some of the other basic themes, one of the topics we write about is money.
My
imagine
favorite.
That. Exactly. It is. Believe it or not, one of the themes is the role of money in your life. This is actually one of the more insightful themes, because whether we know it or not, we all have a relationship with money. And this theme helps you examine, where did that relationship find its roots? Where did it come from? What were your parents' practices about money? Did they share ideas about money? Did they teach you how to save? Did you have a concept of what money was of value? There's a lot of angles to approach. People think when they get this theme, are you kidding? You want me to talk about money?
Yeah.
But when they come back the next week, the stories are fascinating. So I'll give you a look at 1 or 2 other themes. Another theme is gender. What was it like growing up, as a male or as a female? It's when I have mixed classes, both men and women in the class, there's just so much insight that happens when, a male might say, wow, I didn't know that that's what's going on in the female's mind when they're 10 years old, or vice versa. As the male client might talk about, what were their feelings towards, including girls in that baseball game when they were 8 years old, or talking about what were your experiences in the workplace, being a male or being a female. Again, many, many angles to approach in that theme. So those are just 3 of the 10 themes, examples of what kind of topics we talk on.
Are those
They're
3?
Themes they're themes that you wouldn't really think about. If you're going to sit down and write your memoir, people usually start off, okay, I was 5 years old, and they move chronologically through it. This process is more of a theme-based approach to writing your life story.
I think it was around Christmas, you and I started having this conversation, and you had given me, you shared a prompt with me. It was like, write a story in 7 words or something along those lines. And something like that. I can't remember exactly, but I remember I shared it with so many people. It seemed so powerful in that moment. And just the idea to have somebody that understands this process and can lead you through it and get you to open up and think about the world maybe, and about how you exist in the world. I mean, I'm really excited about it. I think part of it, Heidi, is because in writing 2 books, I have had to really think through what I'm writing and how I'm sharing it. And I love the process of writing. What is a favorite prompt for you as you think about when you're sitting in this group and you're coaching people through it? What's a favorite one that you like to talk about?
I've been through these all so many times, and most often I take students past the first course into a second course, a third course, a fourth course, and I have numerous teams that are moving on, and so I'm always creating new prompts. And my favorite one, that's a really hard question because every single prompt elicits a different angle of your life. And I'm going to have to say, I don't have an answer for that question.
Okay.
Because everyone is equally valuable. They all bring out one other aspect of your life or a new angle to look at, even the ones that are created after class, after we go on and move on to other prompts. In fact, there was one that one of my colleagues shared with me just yesterday. It was called the reverse bucket list, which we all know what your bucket list is, that list of things you want to do. Well, the concept of the reverse bucket list is write about something that you're really glad you did, that you had the opportunity to do, you took that opportunity. What was it that you're glad that you did this? It's not really about an accomplishment, but it's about something that you actually did. And it may not have been on your bucket list. I thought that's a great theme to write on. I'm really glad I asked that girl for a date because she became my wife, or I'm really glad I spent time with my father and went on that fishing trip, and then you write about it.
One of the things I'm always trying to glean from people, and one of the things I love about the work that I get to do, is that I get to walk life with people, and oftentimes the people that I'm meeting with are retired, and so they're more reflective. They're not trying to achieve success or status. They've already arrived at those things, and now they're more reflective on their life, and they're really designing the next area of life. And so for me, it's been so enriching and rewarding to be able to see what it means to live a good life and what choices people make along the way. When you're in these meetings with people, is it hard for them to open up and share stories in a public forum like that, where there's 5 or 6 or 7 people all sharing?
That's a great question. When people first walk in the door or first check into a Zoom class, yes, they're quiet as a mouse. But through the activities that we do in class, it helps kind of break the ice. People, we break off in like little pairs and do some sharing. We do activities and people start to talk more. And they see this person across the table and they go, oh, you guys had Cheerios Sunday night for dinner. So did we. Or that was our favorite snack. There's these little commonalities. And you get a little surge of adrenaline when you find a commonality, even if it's very insignificant, with someone else. You find a connection. And very seriously, by the time people leave that first class, they're talking, they're buzzing. They come back the next class a little bit hesitant. Oh, I've got my story. And you can see it on their faces. They're a little apprehensive. But then the sharing starts. And here's one of the most important pieces of this entire process is how we respond to someone else's story. In this class, there is no criticism. It's not a class about criticizing your writing or trying to make your writing more perfect. It's about honoring the story you've heard from someone, honoring the emotions that they went through in that particular event, honoring the intent of which they wrote the story for, and really just listening. We don't take a lot of time to listen to people. And in this setting, you are listened to. And we practice the art of good listening. And in so doing, then we respond to a person in a very positive way about how, things that we saw in that story. And people just kind of grow. You see them settling into their chair and they get a smile on their face. And that confidence just builds week after week. And the group becomes very, very bonded. It's a very trusting group that it kind of melts away. Those anxieties really melt away that you talked about.
Is there any opportunity to share any kind of story from you personally or something that you've heard?
I've heard thousands of stories and they're all wonderful. when I'm done with the class, I spend the next week just reminiscing over those stories and who, the person that wrote them. I'll share a little bit about my experience in the stories that I wrote. When I wrote, and when I did write most of my stories, my parents were both alive. And I wrote the stories with my parents as the intended audience because I wanted them to know that their method of raising me and my siblings and the things that they did, the activities we did as a family were very impactful. And so they were my audience as I wrote. And so I wrote about, things like huckleberry picking. I grew up in Michigan on a small town in a rural setting. And, in the summers we'd go huckleberry picking. Or I wrote about some of our family traditions around the holidays and how gathering together as a family and prayer and devotions were a part of our family. I wrote about Dad reading bedtime stories to me at night, and I'd send them to my parents, and they loved those stories. Sometimes my mom would say, "Really? We did that?" And it's remarkable how they felt about my memories and how the things they did impacted me in my life. And that in turn was really rewarding for me to see is how they felt an accomplishment from me writing about my growing up. So
I can see that how you talk about the synergy that's created, because as you started talking about the huckleberries, I started remembering with my kids how every September when the blackberries come out, we'd go up to the top of the street and pick the blackberries so that we could make my wife something before her birthday, and how my son would it seemed like more blackberries made it into his mouth than into the bag. He was not a very good.
That's part of the story.
Yeah.
See, look at that. Look at how what I said triggered your story.
Yeah, I know.
That's exactly what happens in a class. So here's a fun activity we do. We have an activity where we draw a floor plan of your childhood home. And we take some time to put little details into that floor plan, walls, windows, tables, chairs, furniture. But then were there people in that room? Was there a source of heat? Were the people standing or sitting? Was there a pet? And as people start to, their mind begins to go back to that room or that floor plan, and the stories just flood your mind. And you leave with that in your mind, and the story is just waiting to be born.
Wow, that is so good. I had the opportunity, every once in a while I get a chance to talk at the school and share stories with the kids. And some of my memories are from like second grade. And I'll share a story with the kids about a time when I was in second grade, but I'll have the second graders stand up. And I look at them and I think to myself, man, I was so... These things that impacted me as a second grader seem so significant and meaningful. And then I look at how little these second graders are, and I'm like, why does this seem like such a big deal? But anyways.
Jason, we're talking about small personal family events that happen to us. But in some of the stories I've heard, I have heard incredible big world events and how those events have impacted people's lives. I have people who write on their experiences in the Vietnam War, or their experiences in some of the 60s activities that went on, or people's experiences with financial situations that happened. So it also is a way of documenting history. And I often think how valuable it would be for some of these people to go into a high school history class and say, I was in Germany as a military person, and here's some of the things that I experienced, or I was in Vietnam, or I worked at the Pentagon. People also tell stories that really have big world implications that help you see world events in a completely different light.
I know for a long time, a question always came up like, where were you on the morning of September 11th? And, for many of us, we remember exactly where we were and what was happening. And I,
For people in my classes, more often that question is, where were you when JFK was shot?
do you find, are there prompts? I could see where it could be real cathartic, and people would want to focus maybe on tough times that they went through. Are there prompts to take people down paths of joy, where it's just these moments in their life that are just sparkling with fun and laughter, or do people tend to tell stories that were painful?
It depends where it takes you. I mean, definitely people write stories of joy. Each person is different. You don't really know where the story is going to take you. I hear this all the time, every week, is, wow, I did not end up where I thought I was going to go. I had no intention of writing about this in this way, but my typewriter just kept moving in this direction. So you don't often know where it's going to go. And you can direct the course that your story is going to take. You can bring the joy into your story. You can choose to write on joyous celebratory events, or you can frame some of those difficult moments as learning experiences, or perhaps things that still need to be unpacked. It's up to you how you frame the things that you're going to write about. And definitely, there are very traumatic events that happen in people's lives. And this writing can become very therapeutic. It is definitely not therapy, and we emphasize that, but it is very therapeutic to write about these things and perhaps see them in a different light, or bring an aspect of joy. But then again, you don't have to write about things that are difficult. You can let the prompt take you in a direction of a happy event. It's up to you, the author.
Yeah. I want to make sure that our listeners know, if they're interested in learning more about this process and being part of a group, where they can learn more about the work that you're doing and how they can reach you. Would you mind sharing your website and your email address?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Probably the best way to get a hold of me would be through an email. And my business is called Through Your Eyes, simply because the stories you're telling is life through your eyes, different than through the eyes of your brother or sister. It's how you saw things unfold. So it would be TYE memoir writing at gmail.com. That's my email. I also have a website called tyememoirs.com. And that has a lot of information on the background of the courses, the reasons you might want to write your life stories. There's a page in there of quotes that talk about the many benefits. There's also resources that you can access. There's been so many articles written over the years and currently about the benefits of writing life story, the benefits to people who are approaching Alzheimer's or dementia, where you might be afraid your parents are, going to be losing some of those memories. Story writing is a great way to help stave off some of those early onsets of memory loss. So there's articles in there that show the benefits and some of the research surrounding life story writing.
I know for me personally, when my dad comes to visit, my kids love to hear my dad share stories. And there's something to that, about listening to your mom and dad share stories and to sort of capture some of those and write them down. What about a time commitment? How much time, how long is a typical class? Like if somebody says they want to sign up, how long are they committing for?
I run my classes in 8 one-week sessions. So a class would be 8 weeks. We meet once a week for 2 hours. First hour is for kind of reviewing the theme and doing some activities to stimulate your thinking. And the second hour is reserved for sharing the stories. And so we start off, week 1, and we finish up with week 8. And then most often than not, people continue on with the second course. So we're looking at about an 8-week commitment. But when it's online, which most of my classes are now, people can still travel and still tune in. I have
Mm.
many times people go, well, I'm going to be gone for week 5 and 6, but I'm going to tune in. I'm going to have a Wi-Fi connection and I'm going to put my Zoom in and I'm still going to participate. And then I also record our sessions. So if someone does miss, they are able to hear the recording and still continue to be a part of the process.
What if somebody thinks that their life is boring, that it's not significant?
I've never seen a boring life at all. I like I said, I have worked with hundreds of people and I have never seen a life that's boring because everyone's life matters. It doesn't matter what kind of financial success you've attained. It doesn't matter what kind of public recognition you've gotten. Everything you have done in your life matters, and you have made a difference. I like to think of it in terms of, I always like to think of the Jimmy Stewart movie, It's a Wonderful Life. And how many people's lives would be different if you were not in it?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's not insignificant.
Mm-hmm.
You have made an impact. You may not think it's significant, but it is. And writing these stories helps you to see, oh, yeah, that was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. I did make a difference. I am important. And my life did matter.
Mm-hmm. I had the opportunity to go to a speaking engagement. A friend of mine was sharing about the value and importance of relationships. And at the end, he shared a story that one of his friends received. This is, I actually had Ross on as a guest to talk about his coaching business, but it was one of his friends had been a high school teacher, and years later received this anonymous note to talk about how this teacher had impacted this student's life. And it was so cool. You just never know the impact that you're having on people's lives. But every once in a while, you get a little glimpse. Somebody will say, because of you, my life went this direction. And that is that's kind of a neat gift in and of itself. Probably wouldn't hurt to reach out to some people occasionally and say, hey, thanks so much for the opportunity that you gave me. I know for me, I'm always talking about how my life is different because of my friend and my mentor, Dean. Had I not met Dean when I was in my mid-20s, my life would look totally different. And I had the good fortune to be able to thank Dean and share with him multiple times just how significant that is and how one relationship can really change the whole direction of your life. So,
absolutely. Yes. And when you write your stories, suddenly you realize what an impact that person was in your life. Mm-hmm. So important to let people know that they have made a difference for you.
There's something
I've seen that happen. I think of a couple situations where a parent and a child have been estranged. In one particular case, a situation comes to mind. And after taking this class, this particular person reached out to their child, and they had not communicated with them for probably over 10 years and established a relationship again, letting them know what that child meant in their life. Where previously the child felt that the parent didn't really care. And so this promoted the rekindling of a relationship that had gone south.
Well, I think the work you're doing is significant. I think it's meaningful. I think it's impacting communities in small ways, but significant ways, just to help us see this interconnection we have with one another. One of the things I enjoy geeking out on is understanding, there's that 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. And I found that it's true in relationships as well, that 80% of the people we know that we're connected to are a result of 20% of our relationships. And I've gone through this exercise so many times, Heidi, where I've tried to track back, how do I know this person? How am I connected to them? And oftentimes it will come down to 3 people: my dad, my wife, and my friend and my mentor, Dean. Those 3 people have connected me to so many people. Like for you, for example, I wouldn't know you if it weren't for my friend and my mentor, Dean, because he was the connection point between you and I. You probably don't know that, but that's how we're connected. And so I think, boy, once you identify those relationships, those key relationships that are important, the most important for most of your relationships, those are key people you want to spend time with and protect. So
Absolutely. Jason, I think you need to take my class.
I think I'm going to. I'm excited to write some of these stories. I love getting to process and think about these connections and sharing some of the stories too. Yeah.
I think you would love this experience.
Okay, when's the next one?
Well, I just finished one up, and right now I am currently I train instructors as well. I train people to do what I'm doing, and I've got one of those classes just finishing up. So my spring classes are yet to be announced, probably starting one in May.
Okay, cool. I want to thank you for taking the time to share your expertise and share this opportunity that people have to learn how to write their story, write their memoir. Even if it's not something that ever is public to the world, it's just maybe for family or for genealogy or for whatever the purpose is. But is there anything you want to make sure you leave our listeners with today before we finish up?
I would just like to say the experience is memorable, it's impactful, and the benefit of doing it with a class is that you have the motivation to do it, to get down and do it, because you have to produce a story each week. And so you get the encouragement of other people in the group. You have the deadline that you have to meet. And all of a sudden, the 8 weeks have flown by and you have 7 stories that you've written. And it's just a great feeling of accomplishment. And you kind of you want to take it to someone and go, look what I wrote. Look what read about this. This is really cool.
2 pages. 2 pages isn't a lot of room. No. So there must be a format that you teach people to follow in order to get it all on 1 or 2 pages.
Not really. It's not really a format. Mark Twain once said, "I would have written less if I had more time." So it's
Mark Twain.
Yes, it's often easier to write more than it is to write less. And the point is, 2 pages is about the interest level of most people. If someone wants to read a book, that's great. But to share a story, in a family setting, or just say, hey, here's what I wrote. 2 pages, you can say a lot, and to say it clearly. But we talk about that more in our classes, how to, you can write 5 pages, but we only share 2 because of time in the classes. You can write more, obviously. I'm not going to measure how much you write. But in class, we only share 2 pages if you've chosen to write more.
Okay, awesome. Well, folks, if you're interested in learning more, I'd encourage you. I'll include links in the show notes, so you can visit soundretirementplanning.com and click on episode number 396, and you find out more about these classes that Heidi's doing and her email address if you want to reach out to her. But Heidi, thank you so much for being a guest on Sound Retirement Radio.
Excellent, Jason. Thank you. It's just been a privilege. And as you know, this is my favorite topic to talk on.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Information and opinions expressed here are believed to be accurate and complete, for general information only, and should not be construed as specific tax, legal, or financial advice for any individual, and does not constitute a solicitation for any securities or insurance products. Please consult with your financial professional before taking action on anything discussed in this program. Parker Financial, its representatives, or its affiliates have no liability for investment decisions or other actions taken or made by you based on the information provided in this program. All insurance-related discussions are subject to the claims-paying ability of the company. Investing involves risk. Jason Parker is the president of Parker Financial, an independent fee-based wealth management firm located at 9057 Washington Avenue Northwest, Silverdale, Washington. For additional information, call 1-800-514-5046 or visit us online at soundretirementplanning.com.